There is a building in Barcelona that has been under construction since 1882. Not restored, not expanded, not renovated, under construction, continuously, for over 140 years. The architect who designed it died before a quarter of it was finished. His workshop was burned to the ground. His drawings were destroyed. A civil war tore through the city around it. 2 world wars came and went. The 20th century arrived, accelerated, and ended. The 21st began, and every morning, the cranes went back up. This is the Sagrada Familia, the most visited monument in Spain, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a building so complex that the people finishing it have spent decades reverse engineering what the man who designed it was actually trying to build. And in 2026, for the first time in its history, its central tower will stand complete. This is how it got here. 1882. Barcelona is a city in the middle of reinventing itself. The old medieval walls have been demolished. A new district, the example, the expansion, is being laid out in a rational grid of octagonal city blocks stretching north from the old town. Architects are competing to define what modern Barcelona will look like. A conservative Catholic association called the Spiritual Association of Devotees of Saint Joseph purchases a plot in the new district. They plan a large Gothic revival church, funded entirely by private donation, no government money, no church treasury, every stone paid for by the faithful. The first architect, Francisco de Paula del Villar, breaks ground in March 1882. He begins with the crypt, the lowest level, the foundation of everything. Within a year, he resigns following a dispute over construction methods. The project needs a new architect. The association turns to a young man who has recently completed his architecture degree. He is 31 years old. He has designed almost nothing of significance. His name is Antoni Gaudí. He will spend the remaining 43 years of his life on this building and nothing else. To understand what Gaudi was attempting, you have to understand what he was rejecting. Gothic cathedrals, the great European churches that had defined sacred architecture for 5 centuries, are held up by external buttresses, stone arms reaching out from the walls, transferring the weight of the roof outward and downward to the ground. They work. Cathedrals built this way have stood for 800 years. But Gaudi looked at the buttress and saw a crutch. He spent years studying the geometry of nature, the way a tree trunk carries load through branching columns to a canopy above, the way a shell distributes stress through a curved surface without a single straight line, the way a hanging chain, pulled only by gravity, forms the most structurally efficient curve that exists. He inverted the chain. A hanging chain under tension forms a catenary curve. Flip it upside down and that same curve, now in compression, is the optimal shape for an arch. Gaudi built physical models of hanging chains and weighted strings, entire rooms of them, to calculate the structural geometry of the building. What looked organic and alive was in fact precisely engineered, the form dictated by physics rather than imposed upon it. The interior columns branch as they rise, exactly like trees, distributing the roof load downward through a forest of stone without a single external buttress. The roof stands because of geometry, not because of external support. He wasn't decorating a structure, he was growing one. Progress was slow from the beginning. It was always going to be slow. The funding model, entirely dependent on private donations, meant construction stopped whenever donations slowed. There was no endowment, no guaranteed income, no government contract. When the money arrived, the walls rose. When it didn't, the workers waited. Gaudi understood this from the start. He told the association it would take generations. He designed for that reality. Every phase of construction was planned to be structurally complete in itself. If work stopped for 10 years, what existed would stand safely. Nothing was left half-formed and structurally dependent on something not yet built. By 1900, the Nativity Facade, the eastern face of the building, dedicated to the birth of Christ, was beginning to take shape under Gaudi's direct supervision. This is the facade most people photograph today. Stone dripping with organic decoration, figures emerging from the surface as if the rock itself is alive. 4 towers rising above it, each one tapering to a spire capped in Venetian mosaic that catches the Barcelona sun in every direction. Gaudi did not design decoration. He encoded theology into geometry. Every figure, every creature, every plant carved into the stone carries specific meaning. The facade is a Bible in stone, readable if you know the language, from ground to tip. It took him decades. He was still working on it when he died, June 7, 1926. Antoni Gaudí, 73 years old, is struck by a tram on the Gran Via, 2 kilometers from the building site. He is dressed so plainly that passers-by assume he is a beggar. He is taken to the poorest ward of the hospital. By the time anyone realizes who he is, it is too late. He dies 3 days later. He is buried in the crypt of the Sagrada Família, the very space that was under construction when he inherited the project 43 years earlier. He left behind physical models, drawings, and written notes. Enough, his collaborators believed, to continue the work according to his vision. Construction continued under a succession of architects who had worked alongside him and understood his methods. Then came 1936. The Spanish Civil War reaches Barcelona in July 1936. Anarchist militias, in the early chaos of the conflict, target symbols of church authority across the city. On July 20th, they break into the crypt of the Sagrada Família. They burn Gaudi's workshop, his plaster models, the physical record of the building's geometry. The calculations encoded in 3 dimensions are shattered. His drawings are ash. The archive that contained the instructions for building the rest of the church is gone. Construction halted. Barcelona fell under nationalist control in 1939. The country emerged from war into 40 years of Franco's dictatorship. When construction eventually resumed in the 1950s, the architects working on the building faced a problem that had no precedent in the history of architecture. They had to reverse engineer the mind of a dead genius from fragments of burnt plaster. The reconstruction process lasted decades. Surviving fragments of the plaster models, some shattered into hundreds of pieces, were gathered, cataloged, and painstakingly reassembled. Photographs taken before the fire were studied for geometric clues. The mathematics underlying Gaudi's forms, the paraboloids, the hyperboloids, the ruled surfaces he had pioneered, were analyzed by architects and geometricians trying to extrapolate from what survived to what he intended. It was forensic architecture, working backward from the evidence of a building toward the theory of its designer. The Passion facade, on the western face of the building, was constructed between 1954 and 2005 under the direction of sculptor Josep Maria Subirachs. Where the Nativity facade flows with organic life, the Passion facade is angular, harsh, deliberately brutal, designed to convey suffering rather than birth. The contrast is jarring to many visitors. It was intended to be. The debate over how faithfully subsequent architects have followed Gaudi's intentions has never fully quieted. It probably never will. When you are continuing the work of someone who cannot correct you, interpretation becomes permanent. Then came the computers. In the 1980s and 1990s, digital modeling tools began to catch up with the complexity of what Gaudi had designed. The geometric surfaces he had derived from physical models, surfaces that could not be described in the architectural conventions of the 19th century, could now be calculated, verified, and reproduced with exactness in software. For the first time, the builders had tools that matched the ambition of the design. The central section of the nave was completed in 2010. Seeing it for the first time, even in photographs, stops people. The forest of branching columns rises to a canopy of geometrically perfect vaults. Light falls through the stained glass windows on the eastern side in golds and ambers. On the western side, blues and greens. At midday, the interior is not a dark and solemn stone cave. It is a space flooded with color, moving as the sun moves, changing by the hour. Gaudi had designed the windows to work with the trajectory of the Mediterranean sun across the course of a day. He had been dead for 84 years when the nave was finally complete enough to experience as he had imagined it. The tower count matters here because it tells you exactly how much of the original vision remains unfinished. Gaudi designed 18 towers in total, 12 towers for the 12 apostles, 4 over each of the 3 facades. 4 towers for the 4 evangelists, positioned around the central tower. 1 tower for the Virgin Mary, and 1 tower for Jesus Christ at the absolute center, the tallest of all, rising to 172.5 meters. By 2026, 12 of the 18 towers are complete or near completion. The 4 evangelist towers and the Virgin Mary Tower rose throughout the 2010s and early 2020s. The Tower of Jesus Christ, the one that will make Sagrada Familia the tallest church building in the world, is the centerpiece of the current construction phase, 172.5 meters, 1 meter shorter than the hill of Montjuïc that overlooks Barcelona. Gaudi specified this constraint himself. He believed no work of man should exceed the works of God. The natural horizon of the city should remain the tallest thing in it. The tower is topped with a backlit cross, designed to be visible from the sea. When it is complete and lit at night, it will be the first thing a ship approaching Barcelona sees on the horizon. The construction methods that built the Nativity facade in the 1890s and the methods building the central tower in the 2020s share almost nothing except the stone. Gaudi's original workers carved by hand. Every figure, every surface, every capital shaped by mallet and chisel at the pace of skilled human hands. The stone is Montjuïc sandstone quarried from the hill that overlooks the city. Warm, golden, soft enough to carve in fine detail, hard enough to carry load for centuries. Today, robotic stone, cutting machines shape blocks to within fractions of a millimeter accuracy, guided by the digital models that encode Gaudi's geometry. The blocks arrive at the site pre-cut, ready to be lifted by crane and set by hand into their designed position. What previously took months of on-site carving now takes days of digital fabrication off-site. The cranes themselves are integrated into the tower structure as it rises. Climbing systems that use the building as their own scaffold, moving upward in stages as each new section is completed. From the street, the cranes look like they are growing out of the spires. In a functional sense, they are. The Gloria Facade, the great southern entrance, the main face of the finished building, the one Gaudi considered the most important, remains the final major phase. Its construction will carry the project well into the 2030s and possibly beyond. This is the entrance through which, in Gaudi's vision, the faithful were meant to arrive. It faces the street. It faces the city. It will be the last thing completed. The funding model has never changed. Not €1 of government money. Not €1 from the Vatican. Every stone, every worker, every crane hour paid for by ticket sales and private donations. 6 million visitors per year before the pandemic. Revenue from that traffic funds an active construction program that now employs hundreds of architects, engineers, stone carvers, stained glass artists and structural specialists simultaneously. The building that was too ambitious to finance is now too visited to stop. There is a specific experience that happens to people inside the nave for the first time. They walk in from the street, from the noise and heat of Barcelona, from the tourists and the traffic, and they stop. Not because the building is large, though it is. Not because it is old, because this part of it is not. They stop because the space does not behave like any interior they have been in before. The columns branch overhead, and the vaults close above them in patterns that are simultaneously mathematical and biological. The light shifts color depending on which direction they face. The sound, the city outside, the footsteps of thousands of other visitors, is absorbed by the stone geometry and returns as something close to silence. The scale does not crush, it lifts. Gaudi was designing an emotion. The structure was the instrument. After 144 years, it is still being tuned. In 2026, the Tower of Jesus Christ will be complete. For the first time in the building's history, the central spire will stand at its intended height. The cross on top, backlit, visible from the sea, will mark the point that Gaudi placed at the center of his entire design. Not the tallest thing in Barcelona, 1 meter shorter than the hill, exactly as he specified. The 12 apostle towers are finished or finishing. The nave has been complete for 15 years. The crypt where Gaudi is buried has been there since before he took over the project. But the glory facade hasn't started. The final 3 towers of the Evangelists and the Virgin are still climbing. The main entrance that faces the street has not been built. The building is 144 years old, and it is still not finished. And that is not a failure. That is the scale of what was attempted. Most buildings are designed to be built. This one was designed to be built across generations, each one leaving it further along than they found it, none of them alive to see it complete. Gaudi knew he wouldn't finish it. He said so. He was not troubled by it. He said his client was not in a hurry. Over 1 million people visit every month. They stand in the light that moves through windows designed to track a sun their architect never stopped watching. They look up at columns that branch the way trees branch, because God believed the forest was the truest model of a cathedral that had ever existed. He has been dead for 100 years. The cranes are still up. The building is not finished. It is still becoming what he imagined. That is the architecture.